This is a bit of a crazy side project I've been having since almost ever. It's the Jupyter ACE emulator. A while back, 2013, I managed to get it on the App Store. And what is a Jupyter ACE? My first computer was a Sinclair ZX81. I expect maybe 2 in this crowd to know what that is. You know who I mean? And back in the early 80s, like all computers was using BASIC, and it's a really awful language. But nowadays I maybe start to think it's a good language to start to get like kids to program. But as a useful language, it's really bad. But at that time, there were a few computers that were using other languages, and Jupyter ACE was one of those. And I almost bought one of those, and I really regret that I didn't do that. Later on, I actually managed to get hold of one, so I have a real one here. So they made like 8,000 of these. And they were very unsuccessful. So Forth, what's that? Forth is a very small language. It's like a dictionary of functions, basically. It has a very simple way of transporting parameters through a stack. So you basically put the numbers and the operator, and it does what it should want to do. And Forth has been actually used in many places. So if you had like an old Mac from the PowerPC time, those Macs had something called an open firmware, and that open firmware used Forth. And also, what I know is like NASA has been using Forth in controlling satellites and remote stuff, because Forth is very easy to remotely update, etc. So in '97, I was working in Gothenburg with supercomputers and stuff, and I got this urge to do a Jupyter ACE emulator. I had a friend, and we were discussing like, how much better programmer we would have been if we had this computer when we were like 14. So I found a ZX81 emulator and hacked around with that, and it was using X11. How many know what X11 is? Yeah. Oh man, I'm impressed. So I also, because I was working with Silicon Graphics and stuff, so I made a 3D version. So I actually ran this computer. How much did it cost? Like 90 pounds. I actually ran this emulator in 3D on a computer that cost like 2 million kroners or something. And I was laughing my ass off because it was so funny. And and I put my stuff on the net, and then 2010, a guy picked it up and removed all the awful X11 stuff, and that was really good. And I got some new energy. So I saw that some people had scanned the manuals. So I put all these things together in an iPad version. So what's the difference between a simulator and an emulator, you might ask? And I guess drinking beer and stuff, you could argue a lot about this. But basically, if you have the iOS simulator, it mimics the Cocoa Touch API. It's still running on an Intel, so it's really, really fast. You know all that. But an emulator here, it would be, we are like simulating the hardware. So the binaries, or the code you're running is actually for that old CPU. And so what's the hardware done to emulate? And so we have here, I don't know, this one is the CPU. Here is ROM. I think it had like 8K. And it had like 3K RAM, this read access memory. Here's the keyboard. I think there's a timer up there. But the really funny thing I think here, I don't know if how many that gets how funny this is, but actually this thing is a shift register. So this thing is the only thing that generates the video. So the CPU is constantly feeding stuff into this that goes out through that thing that generates the video. And it's such a cheap solution, so I think it's really funny. Crazy funny. And to emulate the CPU, because if we see here, it's basically memory, a shift register, keyboard, and the CPU. So this is the complex part. And this is the internals of a CPU, a ZX CPU from the early 80s. So we have the program counter, the stack pointer, and two 16-bit registers. And then there's a number of 8-bit registers. ALU is where the math stuff happens. And back then, you couldn't actually do like multiplications or divisions. You had to do shifting and stuff. So math was really simple. So, and I'm very lazy. So I took this ZX81 emulator, chopped it up, and basically took the Z80 parts and started to make my emulator from. So this is basically how you simulate the RAM. It's boom, you have memory and you access it. And the Z80 internals, yeah, it was all these things you saw. So you have the program counter, stack pointer, and the registers. Really simple. I was too lazy to type that. And the emulator is actually just taking something from the memory, changing what it's going to change, and keep doing that. So this is basically the internals of it. So it's so dead simple. Yeah, and then I just put everything together. So it has the manual. I managed to put in some sound support, and also doing the Z80 persistent. So you could actually like reboot your iPad, bring it up again, and the emulator would be at the same place when you turn it off. So that's a really crazy side project. Just quickly, I can try to show you how it works, if it's here. So here's the keyboard, and here's the screen. Yeah, this is all the fourth words. And then the manual. I actually added a little bit of. This is just a PDF, and I added a little bit so you can. Well, doesn't work. Yeah, it should work. So yeah, like you see here. Oh, demagods. So this was my presentation of a very crazy project, and I don't know what my next thing with it will be, but it's been with me.